ink for watercolors. Alright, so story time. I once took an hour to sketch a landscape in black ink, and when I added watercolors, to my surprise and horror, the dried black ink reactivated and ruined the entire painting. You don't have to make this mistake because I'm going to show you which black ink to use for watercolor painting. Let me quickly outline a few points to consider when choosing black ink. You've got to consider, one, is it waterproof? And all these are. How long it takes to dry. So if you're outside doing urban sketching, you want an ink that's going to dry relatively fast, because if it takes an hour to dry, then that's really no good to you. You're not going to be sitting there for an hour waiting for it to dry before you can apply some paints. Is it light fast? So basically how it fades over time. Professional grade ink should last many years and not fade when exposed to various lighting conditions like direct sunlight, for instance. Does it work well in fountain pens? And obviously lastly, price. These inks do get quite pricey very fast. Another factor you might actually want to take into account when picking inks are the size of the bottle opening. Sailor ink here is absolutely huge. Look how wide it is. So when you're going to collect more ink, it's a lot quicker than say a smaller opening where you're probably having to be so precise. Let's talk about the Contenders really quickly. Very popular, Noodler's ink. This is a ink from America, I believe, and it's really popular with a lot of inkers. I think it's one of the most popular inks actually out there. Then I've got Delita Black 4. This is mainly an ink used for manga, but I've seen lots of people use this in watercolor painting, so I thought it should be considered. Then we've got Sailor Black ink, which is really nice ink, and a really beautiful container. If you have a look, really big lid, minimal labeling, but looks absolutely amazing. Put that there. Then we've got Higgins Black Magic ink, and this is it even says on the packaging it's waterproof, fade proof, which I'm guessing is light fast, and not a lot of ink for the price, and it comes in this this type of container with a pipette on top, so you just unplug it, unscrew it like that, and then the ink comes out just like that. And then we've got one of my all-time favourites, Platinum Carbon ink, one of the very popular inks on the market. You'll find a lot of people recommending this ink. Then there's another favourite of mine, Pilot ink. It's so this was recommended to me by a YouTuber by the name of Matthias Banovich. I'm probably butchering that name. Really nice. He uses it for sketching, I think, in one of his really old videos. But he does mention this is not waterproof, but it actually is. And I'll show you later. Then we've got trusty Winsor Newton Black Indian ink. Another factor to consider is availability. Here in the UK, this ink is available everywhere. You can get your hands on it super quick, whereas the rest of these, say like the Carbon ink and the Pilot, you have to import it from Japan. It takes a while, whereas the Winsor Newton is readily available and cheaper relative to the others. Then we've got the only blue ink, and I'm including this because it's such a nice ink, and I have to include it. It's just one of my favourite inks, and also the container it comes in is absolutely amazing, so beautiful, and probably the best one here. Looks amazing. You could just put that as a decorative piece in the studio, just like this. This is a watercolour ink drying test that I did for the article based on this video. A couple of things before I talk about the result. When this was made, it was in the summer. The weather was 18 degrees outside and 21 degrees inside, that's Celsius. And that makes a difference because obviously back then it was a bit warmer, British summer, and so ink's going to dry a little quicker relative to now in the winter, autumn rather. This is also Cass Arts cold pressed 300 GSM watercolour paper. And that's it. So obviously what I did here was make a stroke with each ink, timed how long each took to dry. So I took a brush, I did little swatches here and there after every couple of minutes, just to see how fast these dry. And you can see some light fastness. This is about 3 months old now, and you can see, I mean obviously that's not actually a very long time. When it comes to light fastness, we're talking about years. But as you can see, it doesn't look like there's a lot of fading here. These are really good quality inks. So let's talk about this graph. So this is the time scale. So we're going from 1 minute up to an hour. These are the 8 inks that I included, and as you can see, they are all waterproof after an hour. So let's talk about the results. Which were the fastest? It was the Higgins Black Magic. This was actually under a minute. It was so fast, but as you can see, there's not a lot of pigment in the ink. Maybe that contributes to how fast it dried, but then again, the Sailor Blue was also around about the minute mark, and that was actually really quick as well. I mean, compared to the Higgins, there's a lot more pigment in that ink, and it looks a really nice blue. Something to note is that the really dark pigmented inks, the Pilot and the Carbon and the Winsor Newton, they took a bit longer than a minute. Pilot ink actually took 10 minutes. Carbon, which is really popular, took 5 minutes, and the Winsor took 5 minutes too. That might be due to the amount of pigment in the ink, possibly. If you look at the Pilot ink, it's such a nice deep black, but 10 minutes to dry, and that was also in the summer. You have to think about, if you're outside doing a sketch, do you want to wait 10 minutes, or do you want to wait 5 minutes? Or do you want to wait 1 minute? And that depends on how long you want to spend at the place. If you're taking your time, maybe you can go with the Pilot ink and get that really nice dark pigment. Or go for the Carbon or Winsor, which took 5 minutes to dry, but you also get a nice dark pigmented black ink. So part of the test, I did a thick to thin, and with the thinner strokes, all the inks dried in under a minute. If you can see here, all of them. Sailor Blue and Higgins dried in seconds. They were super quick. If you're doing thin lines in your watercolor painting, then practically all of them are worth considering. And for the thicker strokes, Higgins was the quickest, with Sailor Blue just behind. Higgins dried in under a minute, maybe, I think it was about 35 seconds if I recall. Noodlers, interestingly, some artists, like Tio's channel on YouTube, his ink, I recall in one video, reactivated after it dried overnight. I don't find that to be the case. Maybe they've changed the composition and makeup of the ink since that video, which is quite a few years old. Now it's very waterproof. So while Higgins is the fastest, I just don't like the amount of pigment in this ink. I prefer the Carbon, the Sailor, and the Pilot ink. Of all the blacks here, the Pilot looks the most vivid. One more consideration is fountain pens, and I use fountain pens quite a bit. I've got here a few. I've got my very popular Lamy in a medium nib with Sailor Blue ink. Oh god, and then I've got this Sailor Feud. This fountain pen was recommended by Paul Heaston, who is one of the best urban sketchers on Instagram, and I actually love his work, and he uses this fountain pen quite a lot. So I put in here the Sailor Black, and it absolutely works a treat. Let me just get a ink that comes out of it. And then if I show you the Lamy, I've got the Sailor Blue in here, which just, again, looks absolutely lovely. The best inks that I found when I'm using ink converters for these fountain pens, I found that the inks that don't clog up these converters seem to always work, even if you don't use the fountain pen for a few weeks, are these brands here. Number 1, Carbon. I would say second would be this Pilot ink, and then the Sailor brands. These ones here. The Sailor Blue even states on the packaging that it's 4 fountain pens. These 4 are the best for Cartridge pens. They don't clog up the converters. They seem to flow really well from the nib to the paper, and also they're really nice inks. Price wise, these are all actually super expensive. I would say if you're in the UK, Winsor Newton, which is still a really nice ink, isn't too expensive. The Sailors are actually really expensive. They're about $30, $40. Carbon ink is around the $20 mark, and so is a Pilot. The cheapest of these are probably the Noodler's ink and the Winsor, only because I think you can get these really easily. Here in the UK, you can get the Winsor Newton quite readily in different sizes as well. And the Winsor Newton is actually a really good ink too. It dries really fast, under 5 minutes. It's a really nice dark black ink. Overall, I would say Carbon ink and the Pilot, there's little between these. Pilot ink though, because of the drying time, I would go with the Carbon ink. For most situations, painting outside and inside, you're going to find that the Carbon ink is the superior brand. Ticks all the boxes. Dries in under 5 minutes. Really nice pigmented ink. Thin strokes. So Carbon ink, yeah, I think that is the one to go for. My apologies if this video is a bit waffly. The aim of this channel is to be a bit more of a stripped back channel, no scripting, just my thoughts, editing really quickly done, get the information out, hopefully it's of value. And if it has been, then do subscribe, do like the video, that helps I believe with YouTube showing this video around and promoting the channel. And yeah, thank you.